It is on the same level as doing an invasion plan. You have to be a good tactician.
Yeah.
You have to have people in positions that you know can handle the job.
Right.
Your facilities person needs to be somebody who's highly adaptable, who understands the intricacies of the business and will not get frustrated when things do not go right, but has the sensibility to go out. I mean, that's your ground command.
Same business, different day.
Good afternoon and welcome back to the Same Business, Different Day podcast. First, I want to introduce my wonderfully talented co-host, Alyssa Lee Good. A great balance to my lack of intelligence on some subjects. And this is going to be proven today. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited for today.
Yeah, this is a big one for you. I know. I'm excited about it as well. I'm impressed by the number of routes that each of our guests have taken prior to their successes. And, we all start off as children trying to find our way. Today's guest is a fun story. We'll learn how much attention to detail plays a part in his early professions and then get blindsided with the field he is such a large part of today. Craige is a contributor to one of the few industries that you can be involved with in the U.S. and still gain worldwide attention. Are they guessing already? I hope they're guessing already. We're talking about a finance wizard and so much more. We are excited for our listeners to learn about him today. Out of Pflugerville, Texas, please welcome Craige Howlett.
Thank you.
We want to start off, Craige, though, and tell you the rules of the game.
Yes.
Alyssa.
Yes. So this is Same Business, Different Day. We're here to talk about what you do professionally, Craige. But before we get there, we want to get to know you personally. So we're not going to reveal quite just yet what you do. We'll talk about, where you grew up, what you're doing, how you got to where you are. And then when it feels right, we'll reveal what you're doing with your professional life.
Where'd you grow up, Craige?
Okay. Palos Verdes Peninsula, just south of Los Angeles.
Palos Verdes. Okay. What'd your parents do for a living?
My father was an enrollee agent who worked for Hughes Aircraft in the late 50s. Oh. My mother was a domestic engineer.
Oh, wonderful. and that's where we get the big brain from.
I like to think that.
Busy parents.
Now, how about we talk about some early jobs, the early work that you were doing as you were figuring out what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, if you go back far enough, the dinosaurs were still around and the Earth crust was still cooling. And I tried door-to-door sales when I was probably about around 9, 10.
Mm-hmm.
From there,
9 and 10 door-to-door sales. I mean, that's a little early, isn't it?
Yeah, you get a briefcase, you put things in it, you go to their door, open it up, and say, "Hey, I'm selling these items." It was for a company that made everything from Christmas cards to specialized scissors to wrapping paper, anything you can think of. So
it's hard to turn away an adorable 10-year-old with a briefcase
of Christmas cards.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Whatever sells, you got to try everything in life. When I was 13, I started working. I worked up at Mammoth Mountain. I was living in Bishop, California for a year, 69-70 time frame. I was a little younger than 13, actually, and I worked an entire winter up at the ski chalet as a busboy, washing dishes, cleaning tables, doing the whole 9 yards. So I would do that on weekends. So they sent down this limo from Mammoth Mountain that picked up all the kids in Bishop that wanted to work. You'd be there at like 5 a.m. in the morning, and then you're up there about around 7:30. They shovel some breakfast in you and start working. usually about around 5 or 6 o'clock at night. So I did that for the year I was up there. From then into high school, I started to go into the unmentionable. We won't mention it. And then I started learning the inside business from the ground up. Literally the lowest position you could get. We can come back and cover this ground because it's rather interesting, because nowadays none of that technology is used.
Okay.
I did a couple years in college, joined the military, was in the Air Force for a number of years, got out. I worked at Hughes Aircraft, through connections with my family, worked in a black project in El Segundo, California for a couple of years. Took 18 months off to try my hand at business. Decided it wasn't my gig after a while. Worked for the IRS as an auditor. Went into
trying your hand at
computer
business.
building.
What does that mean? Trying your hand at business? Is this you started up something of your own? You thought this was you were going to be your entrepreneur?
I went to see whether or not I had the ability to. I gave myself 18 months to see whether or not I was either on the cutting edge or I was at the bleeding edge, or I am at the tail end of doing computer consulting. And that would be everything from creating the networks to installing the offices. I was at the beyond the bleeding edge. Mm-hmm. And most people didn't even understand the technology and what we wanted to do with them. And about 7 to 8 years probably ahead of the curve at the time. So I said, okay, well, I can't wait around. My funding is basically coming to an end. So I happened to have been back in Fresno, California, and the IRS was looking for auditors, which I qualified for. I did some auditing for them.
It's a big gig.
Yeah.
I mean,
you know, I could tell you,
the government trusts you.
I could tell you horror stories of these people sitting around with knowledge of celebrities' tax returns, talking about them at the lunch table, which is just like, don't feel comfortable with it.
Sure.
And that was their big gig.
Mm-hmm.
So I went into working with another gentleman for a couple of years, doing computers for accounting firms and setting them up, doing network sharing and so on. On an old Novell 3.11 server system, which doesn't mean anything to you, but for those out there who are geekified enough, they would go, I remember those. I worked up in Sacramento for a couple of years for the Western Area Power Association. That was basically handles the grid for the western half of the United States. Decided it wasn't really my thing once again. Took a job in San Francisco working for a company called Alcom, which was at that time basically one of the only companies that had a fax service that was in-house, that was way ahead of its time, way ahead of its time.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the first that went onto an NT platform and could be multi-threaded using industrial fax cards. I worked for them for a number of years. Decided that when they got bought out by a Canadian company, it was time to move on. I went down to San Diego to work for a number of years for a company called Sutherland. We did project management, and I thought it was normal to handle 5 clients at once. Turns out that most of the project managers only do one customer. So one of the customers hired me away, brought me back up to the Bay Area. I worked for them for a number of years. Was looking for something vastly different. And then Stanford University gave me a call, wanted to know if I wanted to run their operations center for Stanford University, which was their operators. And it turns out once I got in there, I found out that they were doing jobs well outside of their scope and outside of the union's purview, it turned out. And as management, I was supposed to look one way, and I decided not to. And I worked for a number of years for the Stanford University in that position. And I did a lot of changes that should have been done 15 years earlier. Then I was offered a job with the Stanford Hospital, their director of telecommunications, which I told them I really, I'm looking to settle down. And they were bringing in an outside consulting company which wanted to eliminate my position anyways. And I was like, I'll work for you for a year, and then I'm gone. And I did that, and then I came down here to Texas because I hate to say this, but these guys, elected another actor as governor. And I said, yeah, went through the first one. Mm-hmm. Wasn't happy about that one. Knew this one was going to be more fun. Said nope. Basically packed up my bag, moved down to Texas, got a nice house, worked for the state of Texas in Health and Human Services. I'm a systems analyst for them, and probably will retire with them. It's a fun little gig, especially since the pandemic. All of the people my age and older who keep telling in management that telecommuting can never work. It's never going to be, a sustainable model because we don't know what they're going to be doing. The pandemic came along after we've been fighting with them, and we've finally gotten to like 2 days out of the week. Now we're doing, coming up on a year. And they have actually told us recently they will be converting they just, centralized everything into one building, 2 buildings, basically. Now they tell us that they're going to be going to the office hotel model. So we won't really be occupying the building unless you call in, make a reservation, and sit at a desk maybe 1 or 2 days out of the week. So, what can I tell you? Makes life interesting.
That is that's a heck of a journey.
Yeah.
Sure.
I won't even talk about the side trips.
One of the things that I think we learn from this is that if you, continue working, then other people will be seeking you out. It seems that it wasn't too difficult for you to find more work, because you had the good work ethic and, you were always out there. I'm a little interested about the Stanford experience, though. That one seemed like they found you, and it was something that kind of formed information with you, whether it comes to your knowledge of, the Silicon graphics, the city, and all. How was that experience?
Established in 2013, Mermaid Valley Vineyard is a boutique winery located in the Ramona Valley, AVA. Nestled amongst the mountains just outside of San Diego, Mermaid Valley has abundant sunshine and cooling coastal breezes, making it an ideal location to produce fine wines. We offer estate-produced white, rosé, and red wines. Come out to Ramona and taste the fine wines at Mermaid Valley Vineyards for yourself. Open by appointment at 760-315-9011 or email at mermaidvineyard@gmail.com.
Homestart is a San Diego County nonprofit agency that has prevented child abuse and neglect since 1972. Our mission is to assure the safety and resiliency of children by strengthening families and their communities. Those in our care are already some of the most vulnerable residents in any given year. With the added financial and emotional stress caused by the pandemic, San Diegans most at risk for poverty, abuse, unemployment, and homelessness need our services now more than ever. To support our mission and learn more, please visit www.home-start.org. Together, we can work towards all children in San Diego living in a safe, stable, and a nurturing home.
The San Marcos Chamber of Commerce is the voice of business in San Marcos. With over 50 years of service to the community, we continuously evolve to meet the needs of our members and help solve problems. Our strategic plan is based on 3 pillars: advocate for our members and small businesses. During this pandemic, we have participated in letter-writing campaigns to the governor and have made statements during county board meetings, city council meetings to help businesses open while following health and safety protocol. We continue to work with Cal Chamber to oppose job-killing bills, and we also take stands on propositions that we support or oppose depending on how it affects our small businesses. Another pillar is promoting San Marcos through special events such as festivals, farmers market, Taste of San Marcos, and most recently, candidates forums for the school board elections and also city council. The third pillar is we also provide valuable resources for our members through webinars, networking events, as well as access and introductions to people that will help your business thrive. For more information on the San Marcos Chamber of Commerce, please visit our website at sanmarcoschamber.com.
Enlightening. What had happened there was that there were 103 candidates. I was number 5 on the interview list. 2 of them dropped out because they did not want to come in person to the interview, didn't think it was worth it. Of the 3 candidates, one wanted almost as much as the provost makes, which was like, okay, you're limited, have a nice day. Second one was somebody who didn't do well during the interview. And so when I came in, sat down, they were like, we'd like to hire you. Yeah. And I said, okay. And they were scared I was going to leave because it was a minefield of problems. And the way I handled it was to learn the job. I mean, you think of an operator, you have a preconceived notion. But these people were literally having to do informational calls followed by code blue calls to the hospital, helping schedule patients to the hospital, things that are well outside of the normal job for an operator, as defined by Stanford's, own job description. They were doing night maintenance for the entire university, everything from student dorms down to the water treatment facilities. And they had a nightmare of an office situation. So we, after about the second week, they started to realize that maybe I was going to stay around longer than the 2 weeks that their expectations were. They actually were quite happy, they told me, when I hung a picture in my office. So I was, like I said, it's always an interesting journey. I mean, you come in with one set of skill sets, and then you start to realize that you have to draw on something else from your past that you didn't really know was going to be central. Because I had run call centers for a Sutherland group. If you know the operating system called Red Hat, I was one of the original project managers for Sutherland Group that started up the Red Hat Linux support desk for them. So, and that's it's a pretty big leap sometimes you have to do when you're going from one job to another.
Sure.
Especially when they tell you it's going to be one thing and you find out it's a completely different once you get in the door.
And they may or may not train you on that information, so you got to go out and figure it for yourself sometimes.
You draw upon your personal. If you spent 40 years doing the same job, being a tour in a tool dive firm, and then the next day they transfer you over to project management, you're going, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
It's you either adapt and overcome or you fail.
Sure.
So I have a lot to draw on. There's too many things that I can't do in what we will not talk about right now, because I've been doing it on the side and professionally for 49 years. So you tend to have a good job skill set that you can bring in, and sometimes applies to the real world as much as it does to that shall not be mentioned.
Sure. Especially if you knew how to knock on doors at 9 and 10 years old.
Need to make a buck. I wanted something sure back then, and that's how I was going to do it.
Yeah. Let's take it to the next step. We're going to get past the unmentionables because I know there's so many more stories, and Alyssa's over here eager. She's chomping at the bit. We got, let's talk about comics, anime. The fandom behind these industries have been sweeping the world for many years, and they aren't going anywhere. Even if they aren't your idea of business or entertainment, I can tell you that you are in the minority. Statistics show that this industry made $22 billion in 2019 and are projected to earn $36 billion expected by 2025. He has made his mark in the Bay Area as well as in Texas. Now, we will say that you left an actor to go to a baseball owner, but we'll leave that alone. A baseball team owner with over 47 years of work in science fiction, horror, fantasy, anime, and conventions. We are pleased to reintroduce you to Craige Howlett. Am I pronouncing your last name right, Craige?
Howlett, yes.
All right.
You can't say it, just Howlett.
Ooh, look at that. I like that.
Yeah, Alyssa would like that. What are the conventions? What are the conventions that you're involved with, Craige?
I've actually cut them down over the years. Currently, my main thrust is Anime Con out in California. It's a nonprofit run by the Foundation for Anime and Niche Subcultures. I do work locally for one of the ones that called Texas Anime Conventions. They do I want to say it's a specialty convention that is primarily towards women in street fashion called OkashiCon. Mm-hmm. And then down in San Antonio, I provide support in the financial side of the house for a convention called San Japan. I tooled those down from the almost dozen that I used to do, including doing Worldcon, which is the World Science Fiction Literary Convention. There are a couple of local conventions, and there's some others out in California and San Diego and the Bay Area that I used to work with. My start actually got in 1972 with a convention called, of all people, probably don't know, Joe Trimble, who was one of the original writers of Star Trek, put together a fan convention in the early 70s. And now all of a sudden you're asking me this, and I cannot draw a blank, and I know it's killing me. And it's where I learned about science fiction conventions and everything there was to know about it. These are the days in which actors did not charge for autographs. Mm-hmm. These are the days when you could literally... Christopher Lee sat next to me for 4 hours signing autographs. And a complete and total gentleman, never once glanced at somebody who put a stack of books that were 3 feet deep next to him for him to sign. Was an absolute gentleman. You can't find that in this day and age when you go to conventions and you've got $35 they're charging for $250 or $500 for the same thing. Almost the entire cast of the original Star Trek have been to Joe's conventions. And you know what? About 2 minutes after we get done with this interview, I'm going to go, oh, wait a minute, that was the name of it.
That's all right.
I can't believe she actually had a couple of, other conventions that she did, but this was the first one in the Los Angeles area that got started. There was a Star Trek convention out in New York, and she was running this one out in Los Angeles. Equicon, thank you. That's it.
Okay.
Equicon.
Yeah.
And for those of us who still are around, those were the old people. That's how you basically got started. And you volunteered, and I was a door guard. And then the other thing that I did no longer done nowadays. I ran the 16 millimeter projector because I was a member of the AV club in my high school. I'm a geek. So that was a rather rare talent in 1972 to be able to run a 16 millimeter projector. Those type of conventions were drawing large numbers, and people you literally had one every weekend. You could go to somewhere in Los Angeles, which also gets me into this is where I know that we'll talk about this, but that's where I learned how to costume. And in those days, there was no internet. So when Star Wars came out in 1977, literally the only way you could see what a Darth Vader outfit looked like is if you went to Starlog, the magazine, or you were looking at Cinema Critique, or you went to a showing or an opening in which Darth Vader was supposed to be there. And you went there with your 35 millimeter camera and your 24 frames you were allowed for that 3 feet of film, and shot as many pictures as you could, and then you tried to figure out, exactly how to make his outfit.
Yeah.
And then you need a seamstress. My mother was handling that side of the house, and I had a couple of friends who were in electronics, so they were able to build all this stuff. And I played Darth Vader for a couple of years.
Oh, cool.
And so a friend of mine who's 6'3" and has a 52-inch chest and has arms as big as my thighs came up to me and said, "I'm the real Darth Vader." Like, you have to look up to the guy, you're short. Yeah. And then I did a lot of other costumes. Yeah, well, it's interesting because you do these things in a different methodology.
Right.
And now today, kids have the internet. They have 3D modeling, printers that can create anything they want. We had to create all of this from scratch, from blueprints, wherever we could scrounge it up.
Sure.
Right.
Today, most of the people I know that did costuming would now be considered master costumers by anybody down in Comic-Con. And they were doing these things without the help of computer designs or aids or having the vast resources of the entire internet at your disposal.
Right. I know.
So it was,
for my cosplaying, I basically download images or take the pictures out of the comic books and send them to somebody on Etsy with measurements. And
yep.
I mean, I'll make some of the stuff myself, but it's to have a professional do it. I mean, I like the way it looks.
It was interesting how many of my friends who were multi-talented, they were leather makers because they had to learn it. They had to be sheet metal formers. They wanted to have, like a jetpack design, or if they wanted to do, that's why most of the older science fiction group has generally kind of gone into the steampunking side of the house because that's their thing. It's their geriatric, exit from this world stage. They go out and do steampunk because they can afford it. They have the knowledge to do it. And the younger kids, it was my kids. They literally, go online, find something they want, design. They tried to talk me into being Mr. Freeze, and they got me lined up with a guy in China that could basically build the whole thing for me. And I'm like, you're missing something when you do it yourself, But if you have access to these resources, you got to use it. I mean, that's, you trade money for time and materials.
Now, is that what you were doing back in high school? You had mentioned high school earlier, and what was it? Some costume work, or what were you doing?
Yes. Well, we did at that time. We were doing different. I graduated in '76, so it was long before Star Wars came out. We were doing different things, but the big thing for me was finding something unique. I was Captain America for a while. There wasn't too much you could really, you could do Star Trek. You could do, your own idea of what an alien would look like. Rick Baker once mentioned, who is, for those who know him, is the master maker of, makeup, an artist, basically he's one of the founding fathers, and he obviously came from a generation that studied those who actually did movies, makeup, and so on. But Rick Baker said that in the 60s and 70s was the last generation of kids who actually had to think about what it is, what it was to think of something that did not exist, and now you're going to make it. And a lot of those kids in that generation had to write histories for what their alien was, and build a world. Basically, it's called world building now, writing, to create a specific character for you, so that you could, anybody asked you a question, you could answer it.
Yeah.
It's not like being a Mimbari from B5, where you have the whole history laid out for you. Right. You were having to create things. So,
I would argue that people do still, like, if you think about Dungeons and Dragons or something, which is wildly popular right now, people are still creating their own characters, and it might have an influence from a previous creation, but they still do create backstories. So it's there.
Yeah, that is very true. Chainmail, which was the origins for what D&D is, what I started playing way back in the day. And first thing I created was a Balrog, and then spent 3 days writing the background to it. So I agree. It's one of the few things. And then of course sometimes you stumble into something like Tolkien, in which everything's written out for you. Then all you have to do is create the character to fit into the genre, which is already giving you the history. So it's a rare thing to, like I said, nowadays, to really somebody come up with something completely unique. Because I think it's basically been, pretty explored. If you look at most of the writers in science fiction, horror, and fantasy, it's kind of hard to create something along Highland, characters, or Larry Niven's Ringworld, or something to that effect.
What drew you to all of this? I mean, what drew you to these genres when considering your computer background, your financial background? How does this come about?
Escapism.
I
mean, I started watching the original Star Trek back in the 60s, the original. And to be honest, I mean, that was to me my kids, again, they were escapism for me, and I told my mom and dad that, and they didn't. Most parents sort of pushed it away. My mom wasn't very embracing of it. In fact, she told one of her friends, "I'd rather have him reading science fiction and going to science fiction conventions than to be doing drugs."
Sure.
Little did she probably know it would have been more cost efficient for me to have been on drugs than have been doing costumes.
Is it that expensive?
It's expensive, but health wise,
I know, right? Let's talk about you.
Mentally, it's like going to a family reunion every time you go.
It is.
Wow.
It is the biggest extended family you will ever have in your life, and these people will be with you sometimes your entire life. There are friends I have that are from my very first convention I still know and I still talk to, and it's been 50 years. So it's how it is for me.
And did you look at it?
If you hear music right now, that's because my son is next door doing his production work.
Can't hear it. That's all right.
Okay.
That's all right. We're great. Now, did you look at that ever as something that you could turn a profit from, or something that you could work in, and like an industry that you would actually be involved in, and people will be fans of your work? You never did.
No, right? I didn't have that side of the brain. I believe it is the right side is logical, and the left side is the artist side.
Sure.
My left side could not figure out how to do the things these other people do. I mean, they could teach you, but you're always set in that certain mold and making just that one item. But to do something that was never done before, or you did it better than anyone else, that wasn't my part of the brain. That's why I ended up going to back of house after about 10 years because I realized I would never be able to be that type of person up front. Were friends of mine that did costuming that were what I consider the pinnacle of costuming. At a Worldcon, they got on stage and did Night of Bald Mountain, and they had a Balrog at the end, the one that is actually at the mountain from Fantasia, with a 16-foot wingspan that he had folded up so that when they wheeled out the volcano and they were dancing around it, he stepped off of the base for the volcano where the judges are, just off stage, red eyeballs glowing, and unfolded these wings that were wide and as long as the table, and then leaned over them, which I could never figure out how that did it, and then looked down at them. At that moment, the competition was all over. It completely destroyed, no joke, 110 other people who were competing.
Wow.
And utterly destroyed them. And, folded the wings back up and stepped back onto the mountain as they were bringing up the lighting to simulate daylight, and they wheeled them off. And I could never do that.
That's so cool. Let's get back to
I watch some of these kids. Well, you know what Comic-Con is like. I mean, there's these kids that have spent all year building something just to show it off.
Yeah, to get their picture taken. That's why they go.
And I mean, some of them get to go to Stan Winston's studio and work and become part of that industry. Mm-hmm. Me, that's not where my brain was. My brain was back of the house. My father was an accountant. He taught his sons to be accountants. He wanted to send me off to accounting college, and I wasn't ready to do that. It wasn't my bag.
Looking at the business side of
very
things,
good at it,
These conventions, they're pretty high revenue events, which means big business plan, right? So tell us a little bit about that, how the planning goes into it, and how the effort. That's
the thing. They don't.
Oh, really?
These are kids who are generating 6, 7 figures income. They're generating enough revenue that, for nonprofits, you get audited by the IRS, which is at a $2+ million level. But they didn't start out that way. Most of them were college students who had a anime club. Who said, let's get together. We'll use the school property on a weekend, and we'll do it for 2 days, and we'll show anime because somebody's got videos from a VHS player or maybe a CD player. And every year they're doing it again and again. It's getting larger and larger. And then they have to move to a hotel. So now they have to pay hotel costs and meeting space costs. And all of a sudden now they have to think about insurance because the hotel demands that they have a liability policy at $1 million. And at some point somebody says, okay, I'll take care of this. And one of the events that I worked with, I will try to avoid names, had the wrong person. He literally at one point was robbing Peter to pay Paul from one year to the other until they literally were financially bankrupt. And that's when I stumbled into them, basically. And I did a cost analysis, looked at a couple of things and said, okay, we can turn this around, but, you guys are going to have to understand somebody's got to be in control. Somebody has to be the adult. So I'm going to be the adult, and I'm going to give you guys budgets, and I'm going to give you, we got 18 months, 2 years to get this turned around. And that's basically what we did. But then as you progress, you have to sit down with them on a yearly basis and say, okay, here's where you spent the money. Here's where the money, needs to go back out. You need to look at the future. You need to look at, all these other things. And then you have to look at your attendance numbers. Because at some point you have to leave a hotel and you got to go to a convention center. And that's a whole new set of numbers you need to look at.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you have to make sure that you have people on the face side of the company who are going to be able to sit down with the mayor or the city and talk at a higher level of what can we do for you and what can you do for us. Because all of a sudden you're affecting the city's revenue because you're bringing in, 30, 50,000 plus kids who are all basically locusts. They will come in and eat a convention center clean to the bone, and then go out and start killing off all of your local restaurants.
Yeah.
One of these events during a 1-year period literally cleaned 17 restaurants out of all their food on a weekend.
Wow.
And the restaurants were
He gave us the tour of the place earlier. It's multimedia all around him. We're going to keep hearing dings and bells.
There's enough EM energy in here to make sure that I do die an early death. Let me put it that way. Sorry, I have to keep up with all the technology.
Understood.
And I tried turning it off, but it's like some of the stuff has bypassed.
No problem. We appreciate you taking the time out.
He's right, though. Convention goers are eaters. I know at Comic-Con they have pretzel stands, and you're lucky to get a cinnamon pretzel. You have to get there really early to get in line. They're really good, but it's a thing. Everyone wants their cinnamon pretzel.
Wow.
Let me tell you a little story. I tried to convince the San Jose Convention Center to bring in fresh sushi to an anime convention. And the first year they tried it, they went out to Costco and bought a bunch. And I said, no. You're just insulting your audience because they know the difference between Costco sushi and real live sushi.
Right.
And it took 3 years of me fighting them to bring in a sushi dealer. The first year, this guy said, yeah, I'll do it. And it's a little mom and pop place. He came in on a Saturday and figured he would, maybe sell out 10 o'clock that night. Opened up at noon. At 2:30, he had no more sushi. He was making it fresh there that I asked.
Wow.
The next year, he brought in the entire family. They started on Friday, and it's Saturday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He was no more sushi. The year following it, he brought in his family and another family, and they were running batches in the back, and they lasted until Sunday, about 5 o'clock, if I remember right.
There you go.
It took them basically 5 years of attending before they brought in enough people and enough sushi that they would actually get to Monday in the afternoon. And in those 5 years, I never once got sushi from them because I would always be showing up after it was gone. So they felt very sorry for me on the 6th year and put a bento box aside for me and waited. And I showed up about Monday about around 4 o'clock, and they said, here, this is for you. So, and these kids were consuming 4 or 5 tubs of rice.
Wow.
That's just, that's trying to show people when you have a 22-year-old trying to explain to the head of the convention services versus somebody who is at that time in his 50s trying to explain something to somebody, maybe in their late 40s, what it is and what the expectations are, and their failure to meet that. You have to be an adult about it. You have to have a sense of business to explain it to them. Sure. The frustration with with these, because remember, the owners are all Asian, so they have a very sense of what should be considered correct and not correct. And you try to run the balance between the two. It's a perfect example. Chicago. I know one of the guys who put together, of all conventions, WakandaCon. Hotel didn't believe that they could bring in anybody for this convention because it just didn't fit the motif. Didn't understand it, didn't have any concept of it. The amount of kids that showed up overwhelmed the hotel. And the hotel was like, okay, ate them out of house and home. More than the businessmen did during the week.
Right.
At which point, the hotel now has to go and profusely apologize to the client because they didn't understand the business model. Even though it was explained to them, they refused to believe it. So, I mean, this is part of this. This is a very group that has a lot of financial clout, as you pointed out by the numbers.
Yeah.
But they're still having problems being accepted by event planning organizations, hotels, convention centers, even restaurants.
That's interesting. You know, and Alyssa's an event planner, and you know, she was bringing up, you know, the conversations about sponsors and, you know, the vendors, and there's just so much that goes into all of that. But I just couldn't imagine, you know, the intricacies there.
It is on the same level as doing an invasion plan. You have to be a good tactician.
Yeah.
You have to have people in positions that you know can handle the job.
Right.
Your facilities person needs to be somebody who's highly adaptable, who understands the intricacies of the business and will not get frustrated when things do not go right, but has the sensibility to go out. I mean, that's your ground commander,
right,
for everything that happens at any type of convention. The next person being, you know, your chairman has to be somebody who understands, you know, that they're in charge of certain things and other people are in charge of other things, and you can't go muddling into their business.
Right.
The person who runs the vendor room knows their vendors and knows what they need and want. So, you know, they have to be able to coordinate with the facilities person. The facilities person has to be able to talk to the liaison for everything else.
Right.
That goes on.
You got
Not
the artists and the media, and you've got so many other
guest
factors.
relations person. That's the person who has to have the velvet glove with the, you know, metal casing on it. Because your guests have certain expectations for the hotel rooms and for, you know, how they're going to be handled and who's going to be doing what. And, you know, yeah, this is like a literally an invasion task force that has to hit the ground. And it requires somebody that has lots of skill sets. So, yeah.
Let's talk.
Event planning and event planner are a rare talent set. My mentor was a woman named Bobby Armbruster. Woman could hit the ground in the middle of a firefight and just say, okay, here's what we're going to do calmly and meekly.
Yep. I
learned a ton from her.
I'm thinking about the COVID effect for conventions. Because, you know, it has a huge impact, and I think it will continue. I mean, obviously, for 2020, things either were put online or canceled altogether. And going forward, there's obviously going to be a change. What do you think?
Everybody learned about their force majeure clause all at once.
Definitely.
And for those that thought that they could cancel because it was an act of God, got a rude awakening.
Right.
I actually immediately told all of my clients and all of my friends that it's actually a government regulation. That's what you needed to go on. For those who don't know what a force majeure is, it allows you to cancel out of your contract with a hotel without penalty for specific reasons. Both sides can do this. Acts of terrorism, acts of, you know, nature, or what they call God, you know, earthquakes, fires, plagues, pandemics. So that has actually changed a lot of people who did not have that or did not have a clear understanding of it. So the other thing being that you have to have a clear understanding of how to project in the future, to have enough reserve budget to be able to close down your event, not have to worry about your revenue stream, especially if you have prepaid, be able to refund all of that and still have enough operating funds to handle you for 1 or now, 2 years. A lot of events decided they would do rollovers, which is it's a gamble because you could have a mass exit. But if people can connect with your event and they find it to be family, not so much oriented, but the feeling of extended family, as we were talking about earlier, then they're more likely to allow you to have that money, and then they'll ride it out another year. Now it's going to be 2 years for most of these events. 2 years without any revenue will destroy you.
Sure.
Most conventions are not set up to survive. Comic-Con being one of the biggest. In case you ever wonder, you can actually go take a look at their tax returns because it's a nonprofit. You can get their $9.90 by making a simple request of the treasurer for Comic-Con, and you find out that they have business properties that they have that generate revenue for them. They own, areas that generate them more revenue, so they're going to be fine. It's the mom and pop, the club run ones that basically go from year to year and don't have enough money to sustain themselves. You're going to see them. Like I said, I'm figuring 40% of the conventions will close.
Wow.
And never reopen. And I'm sure hotels are going to be viewing all of this too differently.
Yes.
When they go into new contracts.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm expecting to see a lot more of them demanding upfront deposits and a lot more money up front to make sure that they are going to cover their costs before the event.
Wow. Makes sense. We had some listener questions, didn't we? One of the questions that I actually had from the listeners, one of them mentioned an earlier convention of yours, OkashiCon, and you spoke about how prevalent women are in terms of just being a part of this overall convention and organization. Can you speak on that a little bit? And actually, I'll tell you the specific question he was asking is like, how do you deal with some folks who get turned off by photographers that oogle over the women and so forth?
Creepy fans. How do you deal with creepy fans?
Creepy fans. Yeah. Funny you should say that because for me, the handle that I got from Twitter is I'm creepy fat old bald guy. So
I just thought it was fat old bald guy, but okay, now I know it's creepy involved too.
So demographically, when I got into anime conventions, it was 50-50 split. In science fiction, it is usually 80 to 95% male, and about 5 to 15% women if you're lucky. Anime conventions normally can usually draw more women. Ours is specifically set to women. The board and the officers, the vast majority of them are women. I'm there to simply provide financial guidance. And so from an operational side of the house, the woman who is the president and the chairman drive more of that, and they tend to be very protective. The photographers are held to a standard that if anybody feels uncomfortable, and they say they feel uncomfortable, you have to back off. More of their people have different names for security. They call them flare. They call them, rovers. They call them all kinds of things. But we have a group that we get out of Houston. They're guys who do Renaissance fairs, and they do other things for protection. And they run around in nondescript outfits.
Sure.
And if you will, if they perceive something wrong, they will interject. They're there to protect the women. So they tend to work with the hotel security from the point that if somebody was out at the pool and decided to get aggressive or become a little too annoying, they know to work with the hotel to eject the person from not only the event space, but also from the hotel and the hotel property. And then usually they notify the police if the person is seen anywhere near the property again. Right. They have them arrested for trespassing.
Good.
That's impressive.
So it's a very aggressive, type of thing that there's a lot of things that AkashiCon does that's not normal in convention circuits because it's much more of a boutique type of event. So they tend to do things in the bathrooms for women that you just don't normally would see in an event. hygiene products that are specifically designed for them that have, our logos on them, and tend to have more requirements. The men's bathroom, they, give them toothbrushes and toothpaste, and mouthwash.
Hopefully deodorant.
Like
That's a big deal at conventions. Give them deodorant.
So there was a group that used to go around conventions called Wash, Rinse, and Repeat. And they were a group that would do monk chant in monk robes with a bar of the old Dove or the old Dial soap that had the rope that went to the bar of soap, and they would walk around chanting. And the one guy had a soap bar on the end of a little chest, so he would, walk like this, and they would do this slow cadence through hotels or convention centers, singing Wash, Rinse, and Repeat.
That's hilarious.
For males. They would actually go into gaming rooms with Febreze by like the gallon and just spray it around the room.
Is
it can be that bad.
Whoa.
Yeah, some people don't understand.
Grown-ups.
Yeah.
There are a lot of males that have no idea of hygiene. They really don't.
Well, I'm going to argue women. There are women there too that. I'm coming from a Comic-Con experience. It's men and women sometimes. So
I'm learning a lot today.
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot today.
I've got another
Some
listener.
Some things you wish you hadn't learned, huh?
Right. This one, another listener question. It was, what's the most expensive part of throwing a convention? What's the one thing that you go, we got to get this out of the way. This is where most of our money is going, if there is one thing.
It counts on the convention and where you host it. If you're hosting in the hotel, it's the hotel bill.
Okay.
That'll kill you because it's the room block. Room blocks are what hotels request of you in a contract that you need to fulfill so many room nights in a specific time frame. If you have not negotiated your hotel contract correctly, they will say for a 3-day event, they want 100 room nights to be spread over 3 nights. That's 33 nights. Somebody has to book the hotel room. And for a small event, and if they're charging you $150 a night for each one of those rooms, that can destroy a convention's ability to be able to pay. So the next thing that would probably be is your guests. Between appearance fees, flight, per diem, that can be very costly, especially if you're getting a named a voice actor who's coming in for an anime convention. Concerning we don't have any live actors, it's just nothing but voices. So that voice actor can make or break the convention too if it turns out that he is has a dubious background, but he's a good voice actor.
Okay. So
now you're having to deal with the negative publicity, which can cause people not to come to your event. You next set areas of expenses are probably going to be all your peripheral things, like the costs for actually associated with doing the event. And it counts on what you're doing with it, such as anything from are you decorating spaces, or are you doing special little food events that are going to run you money. But if you're doing a large one at a convention center, that can get real hairy because you have decorators you have to pay for now, unions that need to be paid for now. You can have convention center costs that are going to blindside you when the bill actually comes. There are a lot of things that you're stepping into a real deep hole, and if you don't understand your costing models, then you could get wiped out and still be responsible for it.
Yeah. What about rebroadcasting fees? For some conventions, we'll do like an all-day video room where you can go in. If you missed a panel, you can come back and watch that panel in this video room. If you have to broadcast material that is from another production company, are there fees that go into that, or is it sort of all of a signed contract?
Sometimes you can negotiate those.
Okay.
But broadcasting itself is becoming more of a mainstream. So if, like the music I'm listening to from my son next door, that all comes under ASCAP. And ASCAP used to have a very complex model. Now they've gotten to a rather basic one, but it still can run you thousands to tens of thousands of dollars telling them the number of people you have at your event and what you're using. If you're doing mechanical, rebroadcast of music, is it live? Live can be very expensive, especially the number of people who are attending, and whether or not that music belongs to that band that's playing it. If it's unique to them, it's basically, they're handing them a check for playing their own music. But they're also charging them for it.
Right.
The rebroadcasting of somebody else's material about every 15 minutes. Fine. Thank you very much. I have to move my mouse a little more often to keep my mind. So rebroadcasting is variables.
Yeah.
Counts on who it is, what it is, and what the material is. And you need to know those costs before you enter a contract.
Right.
When you have a guest relations, there should be a performance agreement contract or pact, because you need to know your responsibilities, their responsibilities, and you need to know the financial outlay that you need to pay them for appearance fees, per diems, travel, ground transportation, whether or not there's expectations of dinners involved that are beyond the per diems. And you need to make sure they understand how many panels you're expecting them to do, how many signings they're supposed to be doing, whether or not, you can use their pictures, if they have a specific picture, all these things go into this.
Right.
So every time you talk about a costing for something, there are all kinds of variables that go into it, and there's also all kinds of templates that you can use. If you're a person on the finance side of the house knows what they're doing, they know all of these things, and they can tell you. And I mean, just the insurance side of the house is just, it can be, I have a dog who is like, oh, I want to be pet. So there's all kinds of insurance costs that need to go into these contracts that people don't think about. It's just not the event insurance, which is one thing. Mm-hmm. But they need to be looking at, like, catastrophe, kind of coverages. They need to be looking at, do they have a board of directors? Do they have coverage for their board of directors? Do they have coverage for their officers? Do they have coverage for their rental spaces, their office, if they have a temporary office space? Are they getting proper coverages for all these other things? I mean, then you get into the workman's comp. Yeah. And in California, that's ugly.
Absolutely.
That's real ugly. Mm-hmm. Because volunteers on a for-profit are different than volunteers under a non-profit. Mm-hmm. So for a for-profit, if you have to account for every hour that somebody has volunteered to work at your event.
The Film Hub is the future of co-working right in downtown Vista. Get energized to go to a safe work environment that is clean and sanitized. Create video content, live stream events, and all of your marketing material in our audio and video facility. The Film Hub. Do your best work here.
You need insurance, and you need yourinsuranceplace.com as your brokers. And I'll tell you why. They have access to hundreds of carriers, and we're never left without results. Not even the hard-to-place risks. A good insurance broker is a problem solver. Our team is dedicated to getting you covered. Take time to shop with yourinsuranceplace.com. Save money, get protected. yourinsuranceplace.com.
Hi, I'm Jeff Fox, founder of StarFox Media. We're a digital marketing and video production company that focuses on serving small businesses here in Vista, California. We have the team and all of the equipment necessary to produce, film, edit, and distribute your podcast to as many people as possible. For more information, you can reach out to us via email at info@starfox.media or give us a call at 760-385-3117. Let StarFox Media help you tell your brand story today.
North County Daily Star is the leading source for news and community information along the 78 corridor. It's free to subscribe and it is updated daily. Look for us on your mobile device or computer at ncdailystar.com.
You could get hit with a very large bill from the workman's comp because whether or not they volunteer or not, they're being compensated in any way, shape, or form. You can become liable, and you can address this because I know you've got the answers to this one.
Right.
And if it's a nonprofit, you still have to record all the hours because you still have to turn it over to workman's comp to let them know. And they may or may not present you with a bill.
Right.
And all these things are not considered when most people do an anime convention. They really don't.
About another listener question.
Free financial advice.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It's helpful for me.
Absolutely.
I have one more listener question. It was about cosplaying. But as far as the insurance side, a lot of cosplayers, particularly in the anime world, bring weapons. And is there any kind of liability insurance for that? How do you deal with that?
Okay, so for most conventions, they will ask that you peace bond, which is the ability to make sure that it is a non-functional, and it fits within the criteria of what they want to bring. Obviously, for those who all want to be in Raccoon City police outfits, that's fine, but know that most conventions now kind of frown on it because they can't tell you from the real thing.
Mm-hmm.
For all those who've brought in their, their Warhammer 40,000 outfit, kind of hard to think it's real. Try looking at it from this point. For all those that have old enough memory of a movie called Logan's Run and a TV show, they used to have flame guns. There was a couple of guys in down Los Angeles, and this was in the late 70s, early 80s, who actually made real ones using butane. And they produced a good-sized flame out of these things. Nowadays, no, you can't do that. But back in those days, we could.
Wow.
Somebody made a xenon tube strobe one, which was very popular for a very long time. The insurance side of the house is for the insurance carrier is going to be, what were you thinking and why would you think we would allow you to have, a flaming weapon? Or say it has a 4-foot, super sharpened, 440 steel knife on the end of a gun barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you think we would think that would be a good idea? And you don't even want to know what a gun convention nowadays probably has to carry in the way of liability insurance.
Right.
So most conventions filter out that by making sure that everything was inside of a specific policy. Most of them are for any convention site have these. They want to make sure that you can still cosplay, but let's make sure that the Cloud sword, all 9 feet of it, strapped to your back, stays there and doesn't come off and be swirling it around. Most people are adult enough to know where that limit line is. Those that don't usually get caught by the people doing peace bonding and told be the peace bonder or take it home.
Mm-hmm.
Conventions have very strict rules concerning sword makers in your vendor room. When anybody has a sharp-edged weapon, that as soon as it's given to you, you get to take it to your room or your car.
Mm.
No standing out on the concourse with it, swinging it around and test it out. From an insurance side, that is part of the policy and the riders that you're going to have put in there, whether or not you're aware of something that could be, most vendors carry their own insurance policies for that type of thing.
Uh-huh.
It's possible that your insurance carrier may ask you to carry another liability or another rider that covers between the end of the booth space and the person's car.
I want to see a science fiction convention insurance form with there's just a clause and it says swords and lasers and all these things.
Show you.
That'd be great.
That's no problem. It's right down the hall.
I mean, how do you insure a Gundam suit that some guy is wearing that's 13 feet tall that wants to come into your door space that's 10 feet high,
right?
And wants to walk around your concourse. It's like you're afraid of him stepping on somebody. Possibility.
Yeah.
So it's those things that just got to kind of be an adult about it.
Sure.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Exactly.
Let's go to my book corner. Often on this podcast, we'll talk about books or media that has been inspirational just on your journey. And so for you, it's kind of a 2-part question because, of course, I want to know if you have any, science fiction that you want to recommend. But also inspirational texts? Anything that you found helpful along the way?
The science fiction side of the house, you can just start with the writers in the 50s and just work your way to 40s and come straight forward. Almost all of those are men who were trying to look into the future, and sometimes they hit it on the mark. A lot of times, Asimov, continually hit it on the mark for what the future is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get other authors who talk about wars in which the computers are the size of houses that are on trucks that, are invading. And it's like, yeah, now it's on my wristwatch, dude. I don't know what to expect. And then for me, a lot of the anime, it's my first introduction to a whole series that I actually read all the way through was Love Hina. I'm not sure if you were aware of it. Then Trigun, and then, now I'm kind of like all over the place because they have enough that I can start, and there are, 15 or 20 of the mangas that you have to, read just to catch up. And then, of course, I'm old enough to remember when Akira came out.
Mm-hmm.
And people thought it was, startling animation. And I said, well, if you remember, don't remember a show from the early 60s called Johnny Quest, which the animation and the entire series for the first season were directly written for adults.
Okay.
If you ever watched the old Hanna-Barbera, they spent a lot of money in production costs to make it really cutting edge. So for me, watching Johnny Quest was like, hang on a second. Oh, here you go.
Mm-hmm.
Carmen, Henchman's Local.
Number
240. Oh, that's a great animation.
All righty.
We're the one that make the world work.
Okay.
It's the henchman. It's not the villain. It's the henchman.
Uh-huh.
They never get enough credit.
You're
like
right.
the minion. So for me, that was what I considered great animation. And everything that came after it, the Flintstones and the Jetsons and the rest were just, nice, but it was never that quality until I watched Akira and I said, wow,
Okay.
that is something else. And then I started getting more into Japanese animation, and there's just, nowadays you will find more people probably attending a anime convention in the local area than you will probably for most major conventions. I mean, square dancing is it still can draw a lot of people in, but when you get 50,000 kids, and these are between the ages of 13 and 26, which is normally what the demographics are. It's moving up as the generation is getting older, like the science fiction group. So they're starting to get, more money, but then again, they, now they have other interests. So that kind of, you have to change your convention planning model to accommodate that.
Mm.
I mean, perfect example is when I started out in anime conventions, no one ever thought about a babysitting room. Now it is becoming more and more of the norm.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm expecting the next thing is what happened in science fiction conventions, which is the geriatric group, so you need more movies. I mean, I can remember conventions where 2 movies were considered, a lot of traffic. And now, you go to a Worldcon and they'll order between 75 and 150 movies because they're picking out everything that's in the United States, basically, and then having it sent there because that's what their group has come down to, So.
All right. Now, the world of anime or even manga, if you have never ever been involved in it and you just hear about it and you say, I'm going to look that up, it can be iffy if you're just looking it up. And so if someone wanted to break into it, just get started, you mentioned Akira, which is probably a good place to start, but what do you think? Where would you start?
Counts on your interest.
Okay.
I mean, if they're into boys, and I call them boys, who are under the age of 18 to me, may be fascinated by everything from, I'm looking at my bookshelf going, where should I start?
It's a loaded question.
they may want to be into the soldier side or the war side, but, so that would be interesting to them. Let's face it. If anybody told me I would ever be interested in reading Black Butler, I would have gone, huh? Now I think it's actually very good. Mm-hmm. If you're into the fantasy side, I mean, you can run the gambit. There's no real one that, would stand out that I would say, oh, yeah, this is the one, because it may not be for you.
Sure.
Go to Barnes & Noble.
There you go.
It's a good bookstore that actually does hold a lot of it. Back in the day, they had a 3-foot section of manga, and that was it.
Wow.
Now it takes up 70 some odd to 100 linear feet of their book space is manga.
Yeah.
And all the associated materials with it, which leads into the graphic novels, and then you get into mainstream.
Right.
Black Horse used to be, not mainstream. Now they are mainstream, and Marvel and DC, and several of the others. But I'm just looking at my shelf, and I mean, it's I couldn't say. Like I said, my very first series was Love Hina, because I thought it was very, very Japanese. I was told by friends who came from Japan.
Okay.
That's a good way to get started. There are, I'm sure you probably have a list in your mind of books series that you probably think fit your profile.
Right.
But that probably wouldn't fit my profile.
Mm-hmm.
They have a D&D series now that I've got like 5 or 6 of them. I'm trying to think. They're next door in my other library. I'm probably got 60 feet of 8-foot tall bookcases that are filled with books. So it counts on what I was looking for. I'm in the wrong area right now.
I started with Inuyasha. That was my introduction.
Inuyasha, yes. There's only like 6,000 of those.
Yeah.
Yes. And you could do, Bleach. You could do Dragon Ball Z. Right. You can do, it just counts on where you want to get started. Some people don't want those because there's too many of them to catch up. Others like the limited ones where they do about a dozen, maybe 16 of them, and then they stop. That's one of the unique things about the Japanese culture. They very rarely run something into the ground like America does.
You guys had me on all of the anime, all of the fun, all of that stuff, the cosplay. I can do all of that, but you lost me at reading.
There's pictures.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So no, you had a trivia question. What's your trivia?
Remember this: comic books have 100% comprehension rate.
Right. There's pictures.
A book
just a joke.
may have 70 to 80% comprehension rate. And actually, the older the books are, such as like Shakespeare or some of the older works,
sure,
when you start getting back into the English lit, your comprehension even goes down further unless you reread it 2 or 3 or 4 times.
Right.
Especially if you have to translate slang.
Right.
And that's the nice thing about, for example, somebody started writing a series called Ghost in the Shell. He literally spent more time researching it to find out whether a connection could be made between a computer and a human brain, the neuron level. So when he's doing his manga, he would actually take blocks out in the manga and then explain the technology. So that you could understand and follow along with where he's coming from and where he's going to. Which basically you have to be somebody in the high-end medical field that understands neurology and biochemistry, who would say, oh yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
But he's trying to do this to somebody who's maybe at the, reading level of a 10th or 11th grader. Not even a 6th grader, which is what most books are written to. Is a 6th grade reading level.
Sure.
That's pretty sad, I gotta tell you.
Sure, yeah.
So
You got a trivia question. I want to hear the trivia question. Were you going to say? Yeah, I thought you were saying a trivia question. You said, "Here's some trivia."
Well, if you wanted a trivia question, no, it's okay. I'm going to pass it up.
Okay.
I at one time wrote 100 questions if you're a Star Trek fanatic.
Mm-hmm.
No one I've ever given it to has gotten more than 3 of them correct.
No way. I bet my mom could.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I mean, there's the one that sticks in my mind is in one of the episodes, Christopher Pike from the original said to Spock, I'm going to be as useful as a dunsel. Do you know what a dunsel is?
Spell it.
The ship term, a nautical term, meaning basically the most useless part of a ship.
Huh.
Like down in the bilge.
Mm-hmm.
And for most Star Trek fanatics, they're like, oh yeah, I remember the word, I have no idea what it means.
Okay.
You kind of go, okay. But I actually spent, I think it's an entire summer watching on VHS tape Star Trek to go through, you had to be so good you had to remember star dates too.
Oh, okay. That's a lot. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm a fan, but.
So have you been watching Discovery?
I have. I'm a little bit behind, but I'm almost done with season 2. Yeah, I'm a big fan. I like Picard also.
So if you haven't, Ansel Mount, Christopher Pike.
Yeah.
And you put him next to Hunter, who played in the original, Jeffrey Hunter.
Uh-huh.
And it's kind of hard to tell them apart, I think.
I agree with you. I have compared, and they did a really great job with casting on him. Yeah, I totally agree. And
along with number 1, who was played by Major Barrett.
Right.
You get the 2 of them, and you look at them, and you kind of go, it's like they had to go through everybody in SAG to figure out 2 people that are going to match this and really have the kick to do it. So, sorry, getting off onto the sidetrack here.
We'll be here for hours.
I love it. No, I love it. It is subject matter that, not everybody has to be interested in, because it's not as important as, really what matters in the framework of this podcast, which is when you're talking about business, you find your interest and you find your way to be successful at it. And we've had the pleasure of having Craige as a guest today to show his path and to show a perspective. And we're talking about a huge business. He's on a huge platform right here, and he took the time out to spend with us. So no matter who you are, where you come from, or what your goals are, hopefully you take a little, some pieces of this from the conversation that we just had with Craige today. This was awesome, Craige, and I really appreciate you taking the time. Can you tell us a little bit? Is there things that are coming up for you and your business partners? I saw, was it Clockwork Alchemy? I know that there are other things that you're involved with. If you want to give us a little information on some of the other things. I know we didn't even get a chance to talk about the nonprofit organizations either.
The quick one on nonprofits is that you don't own the company. Mm-hmm. Company is a public benefit. Mm-hmm. Unlike a for-profit in which you have to report to the stockholders and the board of directors can decide the officers. None of that applies in a nonprofit, model. The Clockwork Alchemy, which is a steampunk event, they're doing a virtual later this year. So is Anime Con. They are going to be doing a very large platform for doing their virtual event. I believe that you're going to find that San Japan in San Antonio is shooting for the Labor Day weekend to do a limited event, probably not as big as they're used to doing, which is, 20,000 plus. But I'm sure that, counting how COVID goes, they will be open. They've decided, even if they have to, imagine if they push it back a month or two. But people want to get back together, and
Sure.
the faster we get the shots out there, the faster the people wear masks, double masks,
Right.
the better off that we're going to be, and everything will get back to normal. I am expecting in 2022 that almost all of the events that I have a hand in will be back at full strength. Clockwork is shooting for March of 2022, Anime for May of 2022, and San Japan for the beginning of September. Those are the ones I really want to participate in, I stay with. Our own event, OkashiCon, is in July. It will remain. We're doing virtual this year. We're going to be back in full strength next year.
Beautiful.
But most of these people, I've also had a hand one way or another in making sure that they stay financially solvent.
Yeah.
So, and if anybody ever wants to talk to me offline, I don't know how to get a hold of me, but I'm sure that our guests do. I mean, our hosts do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what we'll get into next. Alyssa, can you give the contact information?
I sort of can. The best way to check out what Craige does is to attend the conventions. You can check out fanime.com, clockworkalchemy.com, and okashicon.com. All same on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Check out @TexasAnime. But do go check out all of their websites. The virtual is really easy to attend, and maybe consider attending in 2022.
That covers the bases.
Thanks so much, Craig. We really appreciate you taking the time out, man. This was a great conversation, and it's eye-opening.
Not a problem. I'll be more than glad to return anytime you need me.
Love it, man.
Thanks,
we love
Craig.
it.
I had
Thanks so
fun.
much. You're always welcome back.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the Same Business, Different Day podcast. Special thanks to StarFox Media for video production and James Russell on music production. Please like and subscribe to the Same Business, Different Day podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.